My name is John, and I'm 82 years old. I'm sitting here in my study surrounded by certificates, awards, and photographs of business achievements that once made me feel so proud. But tonight, in this silence, I feel something I never expected to experience at this stage of my life. A deep, aching emptiness that no amount of money in my bank account can fill. The house is quiet, my investment portfolio is secure, but my soul feels bankrupt. How is it possible to have everything you thought you wanted, and still feel like you have nothing at all? Let me take you back to where this all began. I was 22 when I got my first job at a small accounting firm. I remember the exact moment I decided that money would be my measure of success. It was during a family dinner when my father looked at me with disappointment and said, "John, you need to amount to something. Don't be like me, struggling to pay bills your whole life." That night, I made a promise to myself that I would never be poor, never be vulnerable, never be dependent on anyone. For the next 50 years, I lived by that promise. I worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week. I missed my children's school plays, my wife's birthday dinners, family vacations, and quiet Sunday mornings that could have been spent in reflection. Every waking moment was dedicated to building my financial empire. I started my own consulting firm at 30, expanded into real estate by 35, and by 40, I was what people called wealthy. But somewhere along the way, I lost something precious. My marriage ended when I was 45. Sarah, my wife of 20 years, sat me down one evening and said, "John, I feel like I'm married to a stranger. You're never here, and when you are, your mind is always somewhere else, calculating, planning, worrying about money." She was right. I had become so focused on accumulating wealth that I forgot how to be present with the people I loved. My children grew up without really knowing me. They learned to associate my presence with lectures about financial responsibility and success, not with warmth or genuine connection. When my daughter graduated from college, she didn't call me first with the good news. When my son got married, I felt like a guest at his wedding, not his father. I had provided for them financially, but I had failed them emotionally and spiritually. The thing about chasing money is that it never feels like enough. When I made my first 100,000, I needed 1 million. When I reached 1 million, I needed 10 million. It was never about the money itself. It was about the security, the control, the feeling that I could protect myself from life's uncertainties. But what I didn't realize is that in trying to control everything, I was losing control of what mattered most. I remember the heart attack I had at 58, lying in that hospital bed, connected to monitors and machines. I had my first real moment of quiet in decades. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about stock prices or investment returns. I was thinking about mortality, about meaning, about what would happen to all this wealth when I was gone. But even then, even in that moment of vulnerability, I couldn't let go. I recovered, went back to work, and pushed those thoughts aside. You see, I had built my entire identity around being financially successful. I had convinced myself that faith, spirituality, God, these were luxuries for people who weren't strong enough to take care of themselves. I was proud of my self-reliance. I used to say, "I don't need anyone or anything. I've built this all myself." I thought people who talked about God were weak, looking for some cosmic father figure to solve their problems. If you're enjoying this story, and it's resonating with you, I'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to like this video, and consider subscribing. Your support helps me share these reflections with others who might be walking a similar path. I was 73 when my world truly crumbled. I lost nearly everything in a series of bad investments. The market crash hit me hard, but it was my own arrogance that delivered the final blow. I had put too much faith in my ability to predict and control financial outcomes. Suddenly, the man who had spent 50 years building wealth was facing the possibility of financial ruin. But the real devastation wasn't financial. It was the crushing realization that I had spent 5 decades of my life pursuing something that could disappear overnight, while neglecting the very things that could have sustained me through this crisis: relationships, faith, purpose beyond myself. I fell into a deep depression. For months, I barely left my house. I stopped taking calls from business associates. I stopped reading financial newspapers. I just sat in my chair, day after day, wondering what the point of it all had been. I felt like a fool, like someone who had spent his entire life climbing the wrong mountain. It was during one of those dark nights that something unexpected happened. I was sitting in my kitchen at 3 in the morning, unable to sleep, when I noticed my neighbor's porch light was on. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow who lived alone, was sitting outside in her rocking chair. Something about her peaceful presence drew me to my window. I watched her for a while, and she seemed so content. Here was a woman who I knew lived on a modest social security check, who had lost her husband 5 years earlier, who drove an old car and shopped with coupons. But there was something in her posture, something in the way she sat there in the quiet darkness, that radiated a peace I had never experienced despite all my wealth. The next morning, I found myself walking over to her house. I'm not sure what compelled me, but I knocked on her door. She invited me in for coffee, and we talked for hours. I found myself telling her things I had never told anyone about: my loneliness, my fears, my sense that I had wasted my life. She listened without judgment, and then she said something that changed everything. "John, you've been trying to save yourself all your life. But what if salvation isn't something you earn or buy? What if it's something that's freely given?" She began sharing her faith with me, not in a preachy way, but as someone sharing a treasured gift. She told me about her relationship with God, how her faith had sustained her through her husband's death, through financial struggles, through health problems. She spoke about Jesus not as some distant religious figure, but as a present reality in her daily life. I'll be honest. My first reaction was skepticism. I had spent decades believing that faith was for the weak, that God was a crutch for people who couldn't handle life's challenges. But as I listened to Mrs. Patterson, I realized something profound. She wasn't weak. She was stronger than I had ever been. Her strength didn't come from bank accounts or investment portfolios. It came from something deeper, something that couldn't be taken away by market crashes or failing health. Over the following weeks, I found myself drawn back to her kitchen table again and again. She introduced me to others in her small church community. Simple people who possessed something I had never achieved despite all my success. Genuine peace. They weren't wealthy, but they were rich in ways I was only beginning to understand. Slowly, very slowly, I began to open my heart to the possibility of God's presence in my life. It started with small moments of prayer, awkward at first, like learning a new language after decades of silence. I began reading the Bible, not as literature or historical document, but as a conversation with the divine. The transformation didn't happen overnight. For months, I struggled with feelings of unworthiness. How could God love someone who had been so selfish, so prideful, so focused on material gain? How could there be forgiveness for someone who had neglected his family, who had treated faith as weakness, who had spent 73 years believing he didn't need anyone? But gradually, I began to understand grace, not as something I had to earn or purchase, but as something freely offered to anyone humble enough to receive it. I learned that God's love isn't based on our achievements or our bank account balance. It's based simply on the fact that we are His children, created in His image, worthy of love, regardless of our failures. Please consider sharing this video, if it's speaking to your heart. Sometimes these stories reach exactly the person who needs to hear them. The changes in my life have been profound. My relationship with money completely shifted. I no longer see wealth as security or identity. Instead, I see it as a tool, a responsibility, an opportunity to serve others. I've given away most of what I recovered from my financial losses, supporting local charities, helping young families, investing in my community in ways that matter. More importantly, my relationships have been transformed. I reached out to my children, not with advice or lectures, but with apologies and genuine interest in their lives. It took time, patience, and a lot of healing, but we're building something real now, something based on love rather than obligation. I've learned to pray, not just in moments of crisis, but in moments of gratitude. I've discovered the peace that comes from trusting in something greater than myself, something that doesn't fluctuate with market conditions or economic uncertainty. As I reflect on these 8 decades of life, there are several truths that I wish I had understood much earlier. First, true security never comes from money. I spent 50 years building financial walls around myself, thinking they would protect me from life's uncertainties. But the only real security comes from faith, from knowing that we are held by something greater than our circumstances, something that remains constant even when everything else falls away. Second, relationships are the only wealth that truly matters. All the money I accumulated couldn't replace the connection I lost with my wife and children. All the success I achieved couldn't fill the loneliness that came from prioritizing material gain over human connection. The richest moments of my life now are simple conversations with friends, quiet dinners with family, shared prayers with my church community. Third, humility is not weakness. It's wisdom. For most of my life, I mistook pride for strength and humility for weakness. I thought admitting need was failure, and asking for help was defeat. But true strength comes from recognizing our limitations, our dependence on others, our need for something greater than ourselves. Fourth, God's love is not something we earn through success or lose through failure. This was perhaps the hardest lesson for someone who had spent his life believing that everything valuable had to be earned. God's love is freely given, constant, unconditional. It doesn't increase when we succeed, or decrease when we fail. Finally, it's never too late to change. At 73, I thought my story was essentially written, my character fixed, my path determined. But God's grace has shown me that transformation is always possible, that new beginnings can happen at any age, that redemption is available to anyone humble enough to seek it. Now, let me speak directly to your heart. If you're watching this and you recognize something of yourself in my story, if you've been chasing financial security while neglecting spiritual growth, if you've been trying to save yourself through your own efforts, I want you to know that there's another way. You don't have to wait until you're 82 to discover what truly matters. You don't have to experience financial ruin to realize that money can't fill the deepest needs of your soul. You don't have to spend decades in spiritual poverty while building material wealth. Jesus Christ offers something that no amount of money can buy: true peace, genuine security, unconditional love, and eternal hope. He doesn't require you to be perfect or successful or wealthy to come to him. He simply asks that you come as you are, with your struggles and fears and brokenness, and allow him to transform your heart. I'm not asking you to abandon your financial goals or stop working hard for your family's security. I'm inviting you to consider that your ultimate security, your deepest peace, your truest wealth might be found in a relationship with your Creator. I'm suggesting that the God who created you loves you more than you can imagine and wants to be part of your daily life, your decisions, your struggles, and your celebrations. If these words are touching something deep in your soul, I encourage you to take that feeling seriously. It might be the Holy Spirit drawing you toward home. Consider saying a simple prayer, something like, Jesus, if you're real, if you love me as much as this man says you do, please help me understand. I've been trying to handle life on my own, and I'm tired. I want to know you. Come into my heart and show me how to live. If you prayed that prayer, or if you're considering it, please don't keep it to yourself. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Connect with others who are on this spiritual journey. Consider finding a local church where you can learn more about God's love and grow in community with other believers. My life is far from over, even at 82. But these last 9 years since I surrendered my life to Christ have been richer, more meaningful, and more peaceful than the previous 73 years combined. Not because my circumstances are perfect, but because I've found the one thing that my soul was searching for all along: a relationship with the God who created me, loves me, and has a purpose for my life that goes far beyond material success. I pray that you won't wait as long as I did to discover this truth. I pray that you'll find the courage to seek something greater than financial security. I pray that you'll experience the peace that surpasses all understanding, the love that never fails, and the hope that can sustain you through any circumstance. Before you go, if this message has touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear this story. Sometimes God uses our willingness to share our experiences to reach hearts that are ready for His love. Leave a comment about your own journey with faith and finances. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Thank you for letting an old man share his heart with you. May God bless you richly, not just with material provision, but with the spiritual wealth that truly satisfies the human soul.